Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Dr. Prasanjit Das, currently ACAT JR1 in the Department of Pharmacology in AIMS Kalyani, and I am back with my next seminar. So without wasting any time further, let's get into today's video. So today I'm going to present the seminar on the topic that is overview of good clinical practice, that is GCP. So coming to the contents, so in this presentation I will be covering the definition of GCP, the historical background which led to the formation of the guidelines of good clinical practice, then ICH GCP, then the GCP rules in India, the key components in GCP, and conclusion, and finally we have the references. So without delaying it further, let's come to the definition of GCP. So GCP, as you can see, is good clinical practice. So it is actually an international ethical and scientific quality standard for the design, conduct, performance, monitoring, auditing, recording, analysis and reporting of clinical trials. This is the main word that involves the participation of human subjects. Okay, so the key terms which you can see here is clinical trials and human subjects. Okay, so it is basically an ethical and scientific quality standard for the design, conduct, performance, monitoring, auditing, recording, analysis and reporting of clinical trials that involves the participation of human subjects. So this is the definition of GCP, and GCP provides assurance that the data and reported results are credible and accurate, and that the rights, integrity and confidentiality of the trial subjects are respected and protected. So the GCP guidance document was finalized in the year 1996 and it became effective by the year 1997. So right now, any clinical trials which are being performed, it has to be in compliance with the GCP, that is good clinical practice. Now coming to the historical background for the development of good clinical practice, we will go year wise. So first is the Federal Food and Drugs Act, which was passed in the year 1906. So this act prevented the manufacture, sale and the distribution of the adulterated food or drugs. So adulterated food and drugs, their manufacture, sale and distribution was prevented according to this act. Then we have the sulfanilamide tragedy. So in sulfanilamide tragedy, the basic thing was this drug, that is sulfanilamide, it was used for the management of streptococcal infections, and it was found that there is an elixir, that is the diethylene glycol, in which the sulfanilamide was soluble. So the elixir form of the sulfanilamide was being used for the management of streptococcal infection, but later on it was found that diethylene glycol, which was used, was found to be a lethal component. So the next one is the Nuremberg Code, which was released in the year 1947, and it was designed against the living human experiments conducted in Nazi war camps during the World War II. So here you can see the different inhuman experiments which were being performed, like human beings were immersed in cold water, as you can see here. Then other experiments included injection of poison or gasoline into the living human. Then here in this image you can see the disfiguring scars which was formed because of the incisions which were made by the medical personnel that were purposely infected with bacteria, dirt and slivers of glass. So this is basically to study the course of an infection. Then coming to the other experiments, as you can see here you can see the amputated limbs. Okay, so these were the limbs from the prisoners which were actually amputated and were tried to be a transplant. So these limbs were actually amputated from one individual, and they thought of actually transplanting these limbs to another individual in the prison, but this led to the failed attempts, as you can see here. Then this experiment shows the different twins. So in that, one twin was taken as the control and the other twin was taken as a subject, so test subject. So as you can see here, so it was basically endangering the life of the test subjects because of these experiments. So these were some of the experiments which were conducted in the Nazi war camps during the World War II. So this led to the formation of Nuremberg Code, and it established the fact of the need for informed consent and clearly designed scientific experiments for the benefit of human participants, allowing them to withdraw from the experiment at any time. So informed consent is required and the participant can withdraw from the experiment at any point of time. So these were the two main things which were being mentioned in the Nuremberg Code, which was formed as a result of several inhuman experiments performed during the World War II in the Nazi war camps. Then coming to the next incident, that is the thalidomide disaster of 1962. So thalidomide was first marketed in the year 1957, and it was used for the management of morning sickness, that is nausea and vomiting associated with pregnancy. But later on it was found that it led to phocomelia, that is limb deformities in the newborns of the mothers who were treated with thalidomide for their morning sickness, and as a result then the use of thalidomide was stopped. Next is Declaration of Helsinki in 1964. So it led to the formation of basic structure of the principles of ICH-GCP, which we'll be discussing in the upcoming slides. And the main focus was that investigator should be responsible for the protection of the human during the experiments. So in any clinical trials, the investigator is fully responsible for the protection of the human participant during the experiments. So this was the main thing regarding Declaration of Helsinki, which was released in 1964. Then we have the Belmont Report in 1979. It was written by the National Commission for the Protection of Human Subjects of Biomedical and Behavioral Research, and it was mainly stressing on the ethical principles of conducting the clinical trials. Then the next one is the Tuskegee syphilis trial. So this is a very important one. It is actually a major violation of human rights, and the Tuskegee syphilis studies were conducted in the year 1932 to 1972. So this study was actually done to study the natural clinical course of untreated syphilis. Mind you, the word untreated, it is not treated, it is untreated syphilis. So participants were misled and they were deprived of the treatment which was already existing for syphilis, that is the penicillin, because by that time the penicillin discovery was done, but still the individuals who were having syphilis were not provided penicillin. This is to see the course of untreated syphilis. So it is a major violation of the human rights. They were not provided the treatment which actually was available at that point of time. Then coming to the next one, that is Council for International Organizations of Medical Science, that is CIOMS, in the year 1993. Its guidelines address present day research issues. So it included the issues like including women as the research subjects, then compensation for adverse events which occur during the clinical trials, and safeguarding the confidentiality of the human individuals who are participating in the clinical trials. So the three important things which are being considered here is compensation for the adverse events, safeguarding the confidentiality, and including women as the research subject. So with this we have completed the historical background. Now let's move on to the next topic, that is ICH-GCP, which stands for International Council for Harmonization of Technical Requirements for Pharmaceuticals for Human Use Good Clinical Practice. And right now we are following the E6R2 version of ICH-GCP. So it was actually started to promote harmonization in the three prominent ICH regions, that is US, Japan and European Union, to meet the technical requirements for the registration of pharmaceuticals for human use. Okay, so three main regions which were actually the areas where it was first applied was US, Japan and European Union. Now coming to the differences between ICH-GCP and WHO-GCP. So ICH-GCP had 13 principles, whereas WHO-GCP has 14 principles. The principle number 5 and 6 in WHO-GCP is actually combined in ICH-GCP, and that's the reason why we are having 13 principles in ICH-GCP, whereas we have 14 principles in case of WHO-GCP. But the aim for both of these is to promote good clinical practice only. Now coming to the 13 principles of ICH-GCP, This is the logo for ICGCP. Here you can see the 13 principles, that is ethical conduct, risk benefit assessments, subjects over science and society, adequacy of pre-existing information, scientific validity, independent review, medically qualified care, trained and experienced personnel, then informed consent. Then we have efficacy of information handling, confidentiality of the participants, drug accountability and quality through systems and procedures. Now let's discuss all these 13 principles one by one separately. So by ethical conduct we mean that the clinical trials are to be conducted in accordance with the ethical principles that have their origin in the Declaration of Helsinki, as I have already mentioned, that is Declaration of Helsinki, and it has to be consistent with GCP, so that is good clinical practice. The next thing is the risk benefit assessment. So whenever we are starting a trial, first we have to look for the different risks which can occur during the trial, and we can initiate the trial only when we think that the anticipated benefit is more than the risk which we are considering with this trial. So benefits should be more than the risks, then only we should initiate the clinical trial. Next is subjects over science and society. So what does this statement means? It means the right, safety and the well-being of the trial subjects is most important and should prevail over the interests of the science and society. So first comes the safety and rights of the participants. Next is the adequacy of the pre-existing information. So what do we mean by adequacy of pre-existing information? It means the available non-clinical and clinical, that is both preclinical and clinical information on an investigational product should be adequate so as to support this proposed clinical trial, and then only we can move ahead with the trial. That is the preclinical studies, that is the animal studies, and some of the clinical studies which have been already conducted regarding the particular research area which we are targeting in the clinical trial. If they are adequate enough and we are having adequate information about those trials, then only we can start the present trial. Next is scientific validity. So the clinical trials which we are trying to do should be scientifically sound and should be described properly in a protocol. Then next is independent review. The trial which we are trying to conduct should be reviewed and it should be approved by the institutional review board and also the institutional ethics committee, or which is also called as the independent ethics committee. So it should get the ethics approval and it should also get the approval from the institutional review board. Coming to the next principle, that is medically qualified care. So it means the clinical decisions which are to be taken during the trial should be in the hands of a trained, registered practitioner, qualified physician or a qualified dentist. Okay, so it should be by the trained personnel, that is the qualified physician or the qualified dentist. Next is the trained and experienced personnel. So it means basically the each individual who is involved in the trial should be qualified and educated enough and also should be trained and should have the proper experience to perform the respective tasks which he or she is being allotted in the trial. So different individuals will be having different roles in the trial and they should be expert in that particular task. Next is informed consent. So a freely given informed consent should be obtained from every subject prior to the clinical trial participation. So this is informed consent, as I have already mentioned earlier. Then next is efficiency of information handling. All the clinical trial information should be recorded, handled and stored in such a way that it allows accurate reporting, and later on interpretation and verification. That is, the information should be handled in a proper way so that it helps in accurate reporting and interpretation and verification of the data. Next is confidentiality. So the confidentiality means to protect the privacy of the study participants. So the confidentiality of all the records has to be maintained. Next is drug accountability. The products which we are using in the trial, like the products which we are testing in the trial, these investigational products should be manufactured, handled and stored in accordance with applicable GMP, that is good manufacturing practice. Next is quality through the systems and procedures. The systems with procedure that assure the quality of every aspect of the trial should be implemented in the trial. That is the main point with this 13 principles. So with this we have covered all the 13 principles, that is ethical conduct, that is we should follow the ethics, then we should look for the risk and benefit ratio, and if the benefit is more compared to the risk, then only we should initiate the trial. Then subjects over science and society, the safety of the subject is more important than the science and the society, that is the interest of science and society, and we should have adequate information about this particular trial, that is from preclinical studies and the clinical studies. Then the trial which we are going to conduct should be scientifically valid, and we should have a proper protocol. The trial should be reviewed by the institutional review board, institutional ethics committee, and we should get the clearance from both these committees. Then next is medically qualified care, that is the clinical decisions which are to be taken in the trial should be taken only by the qualified physician or the dentist. Next is trained and experienced personnel. The different individuals involved in the conduct of the trial should be well educated and trained and experienced in the task which is being assigned to him or her. Next is we need to get a freely given informed consent from the study participants, and then information should be handled in such a way that it helps in accurate reporting, interpretation and verification. Confidentiality, that is we need to maintain the confidentiality of all the records. This is to maintain the privacy of the study participants. Next is drug accountability. The drugs or the investigational products which we are going to try in this trial should be produced in the factories which are following the good manufacturing practice guidelines. And finally, the quality through systems, that is the systems with the procedures that assure the quality of every aspect of the trial only should be implemented in the trials. Now coming to the next topic, that is GCP in India, that is Central Drug Standard Control Organization. So CDSCO, that is Central Drug Standard Control Organization, formulated the first recognized document for GCP in India during the year 2001, and it had 10 core principles which were very similar to ICH GCP and WHO GCP, that is the 13 principles which we have already discussed. So Indian GCP also follows them, and the factors which were actually considered and which were very much similar to ICH GCP includes informed consent, as it is obvious. Then we have subject privacy, that is confidentiality, and most importantly the principle of essentiality, that is human subjects are to be taken only if it is absolutely essential. So if we can get the particular information for a particular product by the preclinical studies, then we need not go for the human subjects. That is, human subjects are to be taken only when it is essential to get the information by involving the human subjects. That is the principle of essentiality. And as a result, there was formation of independent ethics committee. So it checks the suitability of the protocol of the trial, then the methods of the subject recruitment and the authenticity of the informed consent forms. So these are the several things which will be checked by the independent ethics committee or the institutional ethics committee. Now coming to the key components in GCP. So it includes three main components, that is responsibilities of the sponsor, responsibilities of the ethics committee, and responsibilities of the investigator, that is the principal investigator who is conducting the trial, sponsor who is doing the funding for the trial, and ethics committee who is doing the review of the trial protocol on the ethical aspects. Now coming to each of these one by one. So first is the responsibility of the sponsor. So the sponsor has to assure that the clinical trial which is being conducted should be in compliance with the GCP guidelines. Okay, so the protocol should be in compliance with the GCP guidelines, and it should also follow the protocol which was given by the investigator. And they also have to document the SOPs, that is the standard operating procedures of conducting the particular trial. They should also submit the status report of the trial to the central licensing authority. So every now and then the report of the particular trial, the status of the trial has to be given to the central licensing authority by the sponsor. And if the study is discontinued, a summary of the study has to be submitted within 3 months, and providing the reason why the study was being discontinued has to be done by the sponsor. Then they also have to report any serious adverse event which had occurred during the trial within 14 days of the knowledge. So within 14 days of the knowledge of the serious adverse event, they have to report this. Next is they also have to provide financial compensation for the clinical trial related injury or death to the subjects, and the details of the compensation has to be provided. So these are the responsibilities of the sponsor, that is they have to ensure that the clinical trial is in compliance with the protocol and the GCP guidelines. They have to document the standard operating procedures. Then they have to submit the status report to the central licensing authority. Then if the study is discontinued, they have to provide the summary of the study with the reason for discontinuation within 3 months of discontinuing it, and they have to report any serious adverse event which has occurred during the study within 14 days of knowing that the event has occurred. And they also have to provide financial compensation for the clinical trial related injury or death, and they also have to provide the details of this compensation. Now coming to the responsibility of the ethics committee. So ethics committee has to safeguard the rights, and they have to look out for the well-being of the trial subjects. They have to do ongoing review of the trials at appropriate intervals, like whether the proper ethics are being followed during the trial, whether there is any change in the trial while the conduct of the trial is being going on, and if it revokes its approval accorded to a trial protocol, means a protocol to which already an ethics approval is being provided, and now they are revoking it back, so they are taking the approval back. In that case, they have to provide the reason, and they have to convey this reason to the principal investigators, that why they have taken back the approval for the trial which was being already approved. Next is they also have to forward the report of the serious adverse events after doing the proper analysis of the serious adverse events which are being reported by the sponsor. So these are the responsibilities of ethics committee, that is to look for well-being and safety of the trial subjects, do ongoing review of the trials at appropriate intervals, and if they are taking the approval back, then they have to give the reason for that, and they also have to convey it to the investigator. They have to forward the report of the serious adverse events after doing proper analysis of the adverse events. Next, coming to the responsibilities of the investigator, he or she must conduct the trial, which is very obvious, according to the protocol and according to the GCP guidelines, and has to document the SOPs also, just like the sponsor, that is standard operating procedure has to be documented. Then they have to ensure proper medical care to a subject in case there is an adverse event during the trial. Then they also have to report all serious adverse events to the central licensing authority, sponsor and the ethics committee within 24 hours of their occurrence. And if the investigator fails to do so, then they have to provide the reason for delay also, that why it was delayed, that the reporting was delayed for a serious adverse event. Next is they also have to provide information regarding the informed consent process, and also regarding the claims which are related to the trial related injury or death to the subjects. So these are the main roles of the investigator, that is they have to conduct the trial according to the GCP guidelines, they have to document SOPs, they have to provide proper medical care to the subject in case of an adverse event, and all the serious adverse events have to be reported to the central licensing authority, sponsor and ethics committee within 24 hours of their occurrence. And if they fail to do so, then they have to provide the reason for delay also. Next is they also have to provide the informed consent process, and that is the information regarding the informed consent process, and they also have to provide information regarding the claims that has to be done following the trial related injury or death to the participants, that is the subjects. So coming to the final slide, that is the conclusion. So from the previous slides, what we can understand is that all the clinical trials which are being conducted in India or in any part of the world should follow the good clinical practice guidelines, and all this stuff should be trained properly with the GCP guidelines, and they have to follow GCP guidelines strictly. That is, they should be properly adhering to the GCP guidelines for conducting any clinical trial. So these are the references. So with this, we will end this seminar. I hope you like the seminar. So with this, we will end this presentation. And so if you like my content, please do like, share, subscribe, comment, and also press the bell icon to get notified whenever I upload a new video. So with this, we will end this discussion. So thank you guys.